Welcome back to Port Elizabeth, the beautiful city. This is part 8. I'm starting here with a picture of a detail of the main library in Port Elizabeth, which was built in 1901. It's not the main focus of this outing. In fact, I was again with my son Doug in 2014, and we were heading to the Campanile, or Campanile, as the Italians would call it. It's a sort of a clock tower, bell tower, which characterizes Venice among other cities. But for some reason, they opted to use that as as a vehicle to create a monument for the 100th anniversary of the arrival of the 1820 British settlers. But we'll get to it shortly. This is just to kick off, because let's start here. We parked in White's Road and then walked down past where excavations were happening for an extension to the 1892, I think it is, Opera House, just visible on the right here. And this extension is this was a previous extension, but we'll get to the Opera House at a later stage. So down at the bottom of White's Road, we pass the library, and there are two of these wrought iron gates. But you'll notice they're the two gates. The whole facade, and in fact down the sides as well, all this terracotta work was actually designed and built in the UK and then shipped out and assembled on site. And this is one of the finest works of, I think they call this Victorian Gothic architecture in the country. But this poor building already, I noticed in the notes I made here, they had started, leaks had appeared in the roof, and the building was, I think, no longer even accessible to the public at this point. But, what a magnificent building. This was so photographed. Whenever tourists came to the market square, which is to the left of this, they would photograph it, because the City Hall and this are... So there's the date, 1901. And although that building on the right is an Art Deco building, does somewhat detract from the neighboring other buildings in the area. It's still within a sort of genre of architecture that is complementary and not, it's got enough character in its own right. In fact, it's a great building. And I noticed when I was last there about 3 or 4 months ago that major changes are being made to it, which I think will detract. Anyway, just look at the wonderful detail, and this is a real work of art, particularly when you think this is happening so far from the UK, in a remote corner of southern Africa. And now they've tried to sort of jizz up the market square with this odd-looking sculpture, which I placed in front of the Campanile, which itself is separated. In the 1970s, they built this freeway all along dividing the harbour basically from the CBD, which is unfortunate. And then there's this kind of, so it just says the Campanile was designed by Jones and McWilliams. Construction started in 1920 and it was finished in 22. I think it was officially opened in 23. 204 steps take you to the observation room. You're 52 meters up from that point, and there's 23 bells in the carillon. And it's got this charming clock. So, as I was saying, they created what they called a heritage walk or something, but they tried to integrate Mandela, who has no actual links to Port Elizabeth as such, but they've named us Nelson Mandela Bay, and so they used that to integrate it with our actual heritage, which is the 1820 settler heritage. So there's a lovely Art Deco building here, the Campanile Hotel, which at this point had just been refurbished into digs, student digs. Yeah, there's the Campanile right next to the freeway, unfortunately. And then we walk under the freeway, and yeah, not really a very attractive sight. That's looking back up towards the market square, which I didn't really photograph on this occasion. And this used to be called Jetty Street. So it led from the market square down to a big jetty, the first main jetty that was built right next to the Campanile, where the Campanile was erected, as we'll see. So we're heading under all these concrete monstrosities where the vendors sell their wares. Sorry, we're looking into the sun. That's the problem. Whenever you look north in PE, you get the sun, especially in winter. So that's you can see the railway station there. And that was the first railway station, I think. Earlier on it said 1857 or 67 maybe, yeah. And then extensions were done, etc. Yeah, so I've done a whole sequence on these flyovers, which will feature in another video. So that's the railway station. And then they created this strange thing around the Campanile, but they hadn't yet started refurbishing the Campanile. So this is an attempt to, again, integrate African heroes. I think this is George Pemba, maybe. He's a Port Elizabeth artist, quite famous in his own right. I can't remember who these people are. Sort of could be Dennis Brutus on the left. Anyway, that's the Campanile. And here you could see, so I noticed it says here to commemorate the landing here of the British settlers in the year 1820. And apparently it was virtually, literally here, we're at the spot where this thing stands, that the ships, that the people came ashore. Because the shoreline was actually a lot further inland. A lot of the land was reclaimed as the harbour was built. But look at the decay around this thing. You know, it's all the concrete's cracking off, and they did end up fixing that. And you know, they gave this thing a nice overhaul. So, but it also did mess up some of its features, which I'll explain later, like this thing. So all around the four walls, you've got this story of the Campanile. And if we start again, in the year 1920, the idea of erecting the Campanile was, and then you continue here, conceived by the Midlands Committee of the 1820 Memorial Settlers Association under the chairmanship of John Stuart Young. Sorry, and then you've got to go back. Mayor of Port Elizabeth, the idea having been approved by the Central Committee under the presidency of Sir Charles Crewe. The design was prepared by William John McWilliams, architect, and the work carried out under his supervision by William Harris and John Hoggan Harrower, builder. The height from ground to top of roof. Maybe I missed one here. is 170 feet, foundations of concrete, so rest on sea-worn rock. Local stones form the plinth. Grahamstown brick and tile are in wall and the roof. The erection was started February 1922 and completed to the glory of God July 23. So I love the use of this interesting, it's the same font and style as we saw here. I think, yeah, look at that S. So they've kept that throughout. And now, unfortunately, in the modern iteration, they've erected what you call it, lighting all around here. Just tube lighting, so it detracts. You cannot actually read this whole thing. There are lights in your way. So this entrance foyer was pretty poorly done. But now this is the Chapman. I think this survived the restoration. Yeah, it's the transport ship with John Milbank as captain, and on board the ship were my direct ancestors, the Footer family. And this was the first one to arrive of the, I think, 27 ships that brought out the 1820 settlers, some 4,500 people. And these have disappeared, I think. Lovely, you know, being the son of an architectural draftsman, I have a feeling for plans, and here's a lovely drawing of all the floors of the Campanile. Yeah, historic, you know. And then all these sorts of plaques and things. I'm just trying to get it to the correct light so that we can see these things. Okay, so then I headed up these stairs, and some of the individuals. Now, unfortunately, as you can see, the vandals have basically stripped away pictures. But I was going to notice, I'm pretty sure there's one of these captions mentions Footer. Yeah. Missing top left, yeah, is a picture here of George Footer, shoemaker. So I'm the descendant of a shoemaker called George Footer. And Doug was heading up in front of me. And yeah, it was just naughty boy. That was a picture of them restoring the, also around 1900, the Feather Market Hall. This is the front hall in front of that, but we'll get to the Feather Market Hall. Feather Market Centre, they called it. Yeah, two governors, Somerset and Donkin, acting governor. So there was a lot of nice historical stuff here. There's a drawing by Samuel Hudson of the early town of Port Elizabeth. Can't really see it, but there's the pyramid on the left there. And it was just a handful of little houses. And there's a typical settler cottage. So I've actually brought out a book about the history of PE, which features some of these maps and drawings. And this shows where the settlers were actually initially had to settle in this area around Grahamstown. But many of them returned back to Algoa Bay and Port Elizabeth, which is down there. And that's where this city was developed. And this is all about the ships. So this has also been lost in the refurbishment. It should have been, this refurbishment should have entailed a whole section on the history of the settlers, all this stuff. They could have revamped it, but I mean, this is important information for historians and for those of us who were descendant from this. And here's an artist's impression of the arrival. And the guy who oversaw it, we've seen him in a previous thing, is Francis Evett. Yeah. And there was Fort Frederick was up top left, and there was this other prefabricated blockhouse near the ford at the mouth of the Balkans. And this was Fort Frederick. I think the fort is just this bottom bit, and then there was like a wooden section on top of it, which is no longer there. I'm going to just race through because I'm running out of time, but so this is how it all looked, a little bit forlorn inside there, but left to go to rack and ruin. I think that thing is what operates the bell or the clock or something. Yeah. This is looking up, I think, or down. Interesting mechanism, which bells were used to ring the bells, I think, or to create the child. You can see these things here. All sorts of old technology. Probably, I don't know what they did. They should have had a museum for that as well. Clockworks room. And then the views through these tiny windows right at the top. That's the harbour, out looking towards North End and the bay, and looking back up Chapel Street from whence the route we came. It's another view up Chapel, out towards Summerstrand, Humewood, and the harbour itself. And along the freeway. And up there is the bell. You can just make out the curve of it. And there I've zoomed in as best I could on the pyramid there and the lighthouse, Edward Hotel, Grey Institute. Yeah, and these two Art Deco buildings here and there. And the Donkin Row here, which we've seen before. That's the library, Market Square. And the harbour, the yacht club is down there somewhere. These awful tanks have been here since I came to PE, since well before I came to PE in 84. And then to the left of them is the manganese ore dump. In the middle of the city, they're exporting manganese by the hundreds of tons, I guess. That is the actual manganese berth, I think. Well, no, wait, it's further that side. All this land was reclaimed. There used to be a wonderful old building down here called the Custom House. Totally ruined. By the time I got to PE, it was gone. It had been built there for 100 years. And then all these historic things here, which I've recorded, but all disappeared. This was about Baden Powell, who was at the opening of the tramways building. And here's a log of the ship of the Chapman here. So I'm actually back down again, and it's just looking at some of the other info that has been lost in the refurbishment, all about the settlers. And like a historic map of the era. This has been retained. This is a list of all the people who gave money or who funded each of the bells. Most of them are descendants of 1820 settlers. And this is a series of photographs that explain the building of it, and that's the what you call a custom house that I was speaking about here. Entrance to the building, and those guys again. Oh, and then we took a look in at the station. Yeah. Well, Victorian style. And outside, you'll notice this has been collapsing for a decade or two, and they just propped it up with these chunks of wood. I mean, it's unbelievable. And here's the proximity of the station to the Campanile. And there's just an aerial view of Campanile and station. And then heading back up, all this decoration that they put up here with quotes from Mandela and stuff, most of it's been stripped away by vandals and thieves. So we head back past the market square, which they've used as a parking area. It's supposed to be open space. And there's the lovely city hall and the clock tower of the old post office. And this is the Feather Market Hall. So, I mean, what a beautiful precinct if properly looked after. And next to it, of course, is this library. And up there is St. Augustine's Cathedral and these birds. There we're walking back up past St. Augustine's. Yeah, so that's St. Augustine's from the 1850s or so. Until next time, cheers.